Okay, I'm going to tell you about 3 strange incidents that happened to me within about a 2-month time frame. It's possible these are all just random coincidences, but deep down I feel they're connected. About 10 years ago, I was working at a job I hated. Lots of people work jobs they hate, but this place was the most toxic environment I've ever worked in. Think a real-life version of The Office, but the UK version, and way more messed up. I would literally pray to get fired. You might be thinking, well, why didn't you just quit? And yeah, this is a fair question. I didn't quit because I'm a coward and it's easier for me to react than act. Anyway, one day my prayer was answered and I was laid off. I was a lead assistant at this office and the company was facing some financial difficulties. They decided to eliminate all of the lead positions. Me and Nicole, a co-worker of mine and the only other lead, were let go. So a few months prior to me getting laid off, I had read The Secret and Ask and It Is Given. If you don't know, both of these books are all about the idea of manifesting what you want to come into your life, by essentially trying to align yourself and your intentions with the universe. Now that I had time on my hands, I decided to really focus on my health and try to manifest the life I wanted. I started juicing every day and eating a minimally processed diet. I also started to meditate 2 or 3 times a day. My meditations weren't long, usually about 15 minutes each session. I was living with my dad at the time, which was convenient because I didn't need to worry about rent. My dad had a chair in his living room that came from my grandpa's house. It was a really ugly, old, 1960s-looking green chair. My grandpa sat in this chair nearly every day. He'd sit, listen to music, and just stare out the window. A lot of times he'd fall asleep in it. The chair was part of a set, but after my grandpa died, and at this time it had been at least 15 years, my dad only took the one that my grandpa would sit in. One morning, I had just finished meditating and went to the restroom. I had to walk past the green chair and from the corner of my eye, I saw my grandpa sitting in it. It wasn't scary or anything. The thought in my head was, oh, there's Grandpa. Kind of matter of fact. When I walked by again, he was gone, and I never saw him again. My sister moved in a year or so later. This was after I had moved out, and she threw out the chair. Not because of anything I said. I only told her I saw Grandpa sitting in it about 2 years ago, but just because it was so old and ugly. Seeing my grandpa was the first weird thing that happened. This is the next. Laurel, the office manager at my former job, and I had gone to the same high school. She was a senior when I was a freshman, so I didn't know her. The office was small, so a group of us assistants along with Laurel would often go out to lunch. When you work in a terrible environment, you kind of band together and commiserate with your coworkers. It turns out, when she was in her late teens, Laurel's doctor found a cancerous mole on her back, which was removed. The December before I was laid off, she got sick. She kept thinking it was a cold or the flu and went to the doctor a couple of times. They kept prescribing her antibiotics, but she wasn't getting better. She had this horrible cough and would go into these coughing fits at work. One night her husband had to take her to the emergency room because she couldn't breathe. They discovered that her lung had collapsed because it had filled with fluid. After they drained her lung, the doctors discovered a tumor. The biopsy revealed the skin cancer she had as a teenager had spread throughout her body. She worked at the office a little while longer, but she resigned after she started chemo. A couple of weeks after I was laid off, my coworker, who was also let go the same day, Nicole, texted me and told me Laurel was in the hospital and that it wasn't looking good. She asked if I wanted to go visit her. I said yes. I met Nicole outside the hospital and we made our way to Laurel's room. When we got there, there were a few people inside: Laurel's husband, her mom, and 2 of Laurel's friends. They were all sitting around Laurel, who was no longer conscious. Nicole took a seat and I took the only empty one, which positioned me directly in front of Laurel, at the foot of her bed. There was some light small talk. Her husband started talking, so I turned my head toward him when again, from the corner of my eye, I saw something. The best way that I can describe it is that it was this large, dark shadow hovering above Laurel. It took me aback and I got startled and diverted my eyes. Although color-wise it was dark, whatever it was, didn't feel like it was evil or malevolent. I was just scared by being able to see this thing. I looked away and I didn't see it again. 2 more people showed up to visit Laurel, so Nicole and I left, and no, I didn't tell her what I had seen. Shortly after I had gotten home, Nicole texted me and told me Laurel had died. I don't know what it was that was hovering over her unconscious body. Was it death? Was it her spirit? Was it something else? I have no idea. The last weird thing happened a few days later. I continued to meditate every day, and I would focus on visualizing me getting a job. One day, another former coworker of mine contacted me and said they were hiring at her place of employment. To get hired, I needed to apply through this temp agency, which I did. They didn't even interview me, but sent me an email a couple of days later and told me I was going to start with a new training class the next week. The money was pretty good and I had no complaints. Once I started working again, my diet went back to crap, I stopped meditating every day, and I stopped thinking about intentional manifestations. But that's what happens, right, once you get what you've asked for. I haven't had any ghostly or otherworldly experiences since. When I was younger, I was really into photography, using a manual camera, not a digital one. It almost felt like stepping through a portal into a different era of craftsmanship and patience. You would adjust the focus ring and suddenly the world sharpened into clarity through the viewfinder, each detail crisp and deliberate. There's a tactile satisfaction in the pushing of the shutter and hearing that click, a sound that seems to capture more than just an image but a moment of lived experience. With each frame, I wasn't just taking a picture, I was engaging in an art form that demanded mindfulness and a deep connection with the environment. I had a group of friends who also shared a passion for photography. We were nerds and a lot of our weekends were spent dressing up in costumes, driving to different locations around town, and taking pictures. Of course, back then, taking the picture was just the first step. Then you had to drop it off and wait for the pictures to be developed. It was magical to go to the 1-hour photo counter, pick up your envelope full of pictures, and see how they turned out. The anticipation of waiting, the surprise, and sometimes the disappointment, it was all part of the charm. The photographs we collected were not just images, they were a collection of stories, each captured moment a frozen narrative in our little adventures. During my senior year of high school, a tragic event overshadowed what should have been a celebratory gathering among friends. My friend Sarah's parents died in a catastrophic car accident. Believing her parents were away, she hosted a party at her home that was attended by around 50 kids. As teenagers often do, some engaged in underage drinking, adding to the night's recklessness. The sudden arrival of 2 state troopers at the party initially sparked assumptions they were there to shut down the party. However, their actual purpose was far grimmer. They came to deliver the devastating news that her parents had died. The impact of this revelation was indescribable, transforming a moment of teenage indiscretion into a scene of profound tragedy. She learned of her irreversible loss in front of an audience of her peers, a group too large for such an intimate, life-altering sorrow, magnifying her grief beyond measure. About a month after the tragic incident, Sarah decided to join us for an evening out, not to partake in any particular activity, but merely to be in the company of friends. That night, the agenda was casual. We planned to capture some photographs around my neighborhood, which was renowned for its picturesque streets lined with majestic old-growth oaks. We parked our car and I immediately began directing one of my friends, experimenting with various poses and action shots to make the most of the scenic backdrop provided by the towering trees. Sarah, still carrying the weight of her recent loss, preferred to remain on the sidelines, opting out of being the focus of any photos. She was content to simply be with us, a quiet presence amidst our creative bustle. Nevertheless, I couldn't help but capture a few candid shots of her as she observed the scene. These photos, taken without her active participation, seemed to carry a different weight, framing her in moments of reflective solitude against the enduring grandeur of the oaks. The day after our photographic excursion, we took the film to be developed, but due to various commitments, we weren't able to collect the photos until the following weekend. When we finally gathered to review the images, a peculiar detail caught our attention. The photos featuring Sarah appeared distinctly different from the rest. In some of these pictures, she seemed to be enveloped by a soft, mysterious haze that obscured half of the frame. Another photo revealed 2 luminous orbs floating near her, adding an ethereal quality to the scene. This anomaly led us to question that maybe there was a technical error during the film's processing, yet it was curious that these irregularities were exclusive to the images of Sarah. None of the other pictures from the roll exhibited such phenomena, they were clear and haze-free. This selective appearance of the haze and orbs around Sarah stirred a deeper contemplation among us. Could it be more than a mere coincidence or a flaw in development? I couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps her parents' spirits were manifesting in those photos, providing a silent yet profound presence, watching over her during our night out. This thought, while comforting, also filled us with a sense of wonder about the unseen connections that might bind us beyond the visible world. When we presented the anomalous photos to Sarah, her reaction was unexpected. She laughed. She confessed that she had felt an indescribable presence that night, one that she attributed to her parents. Whether it was the cool night air that whispered past her or the soft rustle of the oak leaves, there was a palpable sense of familiarity and protection around her. Even if the peculiar visual effects in the photos could be dismissed as a development error, Sarah chose to believe that it signified something more profound. She felt that the anomalies in the photos were a gentle affirmation that her parents were there with her, silently accompanying her during moments both mundane and significant. Her belief transformed what might have been dismissed as mere photographic flaws into symbols of enduring love and connection that transcended the boundaries of the physical world. For what it's worth, I know that Sarah's experiences of feeling connected to her late parents extended beyond that night. There were other instances that reinforced her belief in their unseen presence. A particularly memorable moment occurred during prom night a few months later. Dressed in her elegant prom attire, Sarah and her date decided to dine at a local restaurant before the dance. Unbeknownst to them, a random patron at the restaurant observed them, perhaps noticing Sarah's radiant but somewhat melancholic smile. In a surprising act of kindness, this stranger discreetly paid for their entire meal. When the waiter informed them that their bill had been settled, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of warmth and gratitude. It was as if her parents had orchestrated this gesture of generosity from beyond, ensuring that her special night was filled with joy and freed from worries. This act, seemingly small yet deeply impactful, was another sign for Sarah that her parents continued to watch over her, contributing to her life's happy moments in ways she could feel but not explain. There's an old house in Central Florida, nestled in the heart of a small town, that had been in my family for generations. It had been built by my great-grandfather. My grandfather grew up in that house, so did my mom, and every summer, my family went and stayed there. It was this old Victorian home nestled among moss-draped oaks. Like a lot of older homes, over the years new additions had been built onto it to enlarge it. As a kid, I'd sleep in what used to be my mom's room, which was in the original section of the home that was next to a sitting room. It was the only bedroom on the first floor, and it was located in the back of the house. All of the other bedrooms were upstairs. For as long as I can remember, every time we visited I would have the same terrifying nightmare. It would unfold with uncanny precision, as if scripted by some malevolent force. The nightmare would begin just as I felt the tug of sleep pulling me under. From the murky shadows beneath the bed, gnarled, desperate hands would emerge. They reached for me with a desperate urgency, clawing at the air as they tried to drag me down into an abyss of darkness. The sensation was so vivid, so tactile, that I could almost feel the cold dampness of their skin against mine, pulling relentlessly. But it wasn't just the hands that haunted me, there was something far more sinister present. Something would perch ominously on the edge of my bed, an entity cloaked in the darkness of the room. Its form was barely discernible, but its eyes were unmistakable. They burned with a cold, malicious gleam, watching my every move with a predatory interest. Those eyes, devoid of any warmth or humanity, seemed to pierce through me, seeing into the very depths of my soul. Some nights, it would just sit at the end of my bed. I swear I could feel the mattress dip with its weight, and it was like the air got thick and it was hard to breathe. This thing, whatever it was, it just radiated nastiness. Pure evil, plain and simple. It watched me, and I could feel hate, like it couldn't stand me being there. I couldn't move when this thing was near my bed. So I'd oscillate between these nightmares of hands trying to drag me below, to a semi-lucid state of sleep paralysis. These nightmares were terrifying, leaving an imprint of fear that daylight could not erase. Each evening, as I prepared for bed, the memory of those cold, watchful eyes and the desperate hands reaching out to me made my heart heavy with dread. It was a recurring torment, a nightly visitation that left me wondering why this room, this space that should have been a sanctuary, felt so imbued with darkness and fear. Because I never had these dreams at home, and I was a kid, I kind of just figured this is what happened at my grandparents' house, so I never told anyone. Around the time I was 8, my grandfather died and my grandmother sold the house and moved into a condo. The parents of a friend of mine bought the house and turned it into a bed and breakfast. A few years later, I must have been around 12 or 13, we were down visiting my grandmother for her 80th birthday. My childhood friend and his parents were there. It was the first time I had seen them in years. My friend and I hung out together that whole night. Somehow we got on the topic of his house. He told me that when his family first moved in, his bedroom was the same room that had been my mom's, and he had these horrible vivid nightmares. My skin pricked and I remember feeling like I wanted to throw up. I asked him for specifics and he said in his dreams, hands were trying to grab him and that sometimes there would be this demonic presence that would often stand by his bed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. We had had nearly identical nightmares. He told his parents about his nightmares and they moved him to a different bedroom upstairs, in the newer section of the house. They decided to turn his old bedroom into an office. He told me that once he moved rooms, he stopped having the nightmares. On our way back to our hotel that night, I told my mom about my friend having the same nightmare as me when he first moved into the house. She stopped and looked at me funny. "Did you see something in the room with you?" I just stared at her as the realization dawned on me that she knew exactly what I was talking about. But then I got angry. I couldn't believe she knew about the nightmares and let me stay in that room. She told me she had forgotten about having them until I just said something, and that the nightmares had stopped when she became a teenager. It was a chilling realization, suggesting that whatever sinister presence haunted that room had lingered for generations, a silent witness to our family's history. We ended up talking about whether there was something off about the house, something, I don't know, unnatural. Mom thought maybe it was built on some bad land, or that something happened there before even great-grandpa built the place. We never really got to the bottom of it. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to dig deeper. The house is still being used as a bed and breakfast, but that room is now a storage room. My friend tells me that no one who has stayed there has reported any demonic presence by their bed. Sometimes I think about booking a stay and asking to sleep in that room. Maybe I wouldn't be affected because I'm now an adult, like what happened to my mom. But when I think about those nightmares, how vivid they were, how I felt when I was having them, I think it's probably better if I don't try to experience them again.